In August 1177, under a scorching eastern sun, Philip of Alsace lands at the harbour of Acre and steps into the cool shade of the city's lavish stone towers. He is welcomed by the retinues of the most powerful figures in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, but the one waiting for him inside the palace is Baldwin IV, a king only 16 years old. Off the Mediterranean coast, the sea glitters blue, and anchored on it is a fleet of more than 150 war galleys from the Eastern Roman Empire, ready to carry Philip's men and Jerusalem's army to retake Egypt. The warriors of the cross whisper prayers and prepare to march, yet on the horizon a darker movement is already forming as their greatest enemy gathers his strength, Saladin. While everyone speaks of a grand campaign, the most dangerous threat comes from small fractures, because the Latin-Byzantine coalition begins to split within the Frankish camp itself. As the costly fleet of Manuel Comnenos waits offshore for its allies, politics in Jerusalem is pulled into disputes so prolonged they threaten to waste the moment entirely. And the strange thing is this: if there is no expedition against Egypt for even a single year, Saladin will see the opening at exactly the right time and turn it into an incursion that could send the whole kingdom into panic. Baldwin is not only living with an ever-worsening leprosy, he is also suffering from recurring malarial fever, and he wants Philip, his cousin, to accept a role as guardian of the crown, a support for the throne itself. Philip refuses, saying he has come to the Holy Land as an ordinary pilgrim, not as a ruler, yet he still wants to arrange a marriage by bringing Sibylla or Isabella, Baldwin's sisters, into his own family. This political maneuvering unsettles Jerusalem's nobility, and months of heated back and forth cool the momentum of the great expedition until it begins to fade. In the end, Philip chooses to leave the center of power and ride north with his men to fight alongside Raymond of Tripoli and Bohemond of Antioch, while Baldwin is considered too weak to join the campaign. Most of the kingdom's fighting strength marches with Raymond, about 100 knights and 2,000 infantry, intending to ease pressure on Antioch by striking the town of Harim, only about 18 miles from the city. At the same time, most of the warriors from the military orders also follow Philip, leaving very few of them in the south around Jerusalem. When it becomes clear there will be no invasion of Egypt that year, the fleet from Constantinople withdraws north as well, and the dream of a joint campaign dissolves like mist. On the march, Philip and Raymond raid Hama, then join Bohemond in the siege of Harim, leaving Jerusalem quieter and less protected than usual. In Jerusalem, the silence of the palace is broken mainly by church bells and the heavy breathing of a young king fighting his illness. But to the south, beyond the sands of Sinai, the beat of war drums and the rattle of saddle and stirrup begin to thicken, warning that an army is approaching. By late October 1177, Saladin knows the Eastern Roman fleet has sailed home, and most of Jerusalem's army has gone north, and he understands this is an opportunity he will not ignore. He moves at once, leaving his heavy baggage at Al-Arish and carrying only a small supply train so he can move faster through enemy territory. To keep his army fed as he pushes deeper, Saladin sends fast cavalry detachments ahead to loot, forage, and seize weakly defended towns, building provisions inside enemy lands. By mid-November, Baldwin's scouts report that a large force is moving into the kingdom, and the danger becomes undeniable. Despite the torment of a deadly illness, Baldwin struggles to assemble troops and march to Ascalon, hoping to stop Saladin before the road to Jerusalem lies open. The crusader force numbers around 375 knights and 80 Templars, small enough that, at a glance, it feels like a gamble. Contrary to some accounts, the original script emphasizes that Baldwin rode on horseback, not on a litter, because at 16, his leprosy had weakened his right arm, but had not yet prevented him from riding into battle. With his strength effectively reduced to one hand, he was taught to control his mount with his knees, so he could keep balance and issue orders in the crush of fighting. Great nobles ride beside him, Balian of Ibelin, Balian's older brother Baldwin II of Ramla, Reginald Grenier, Jocelyn III of Edessa, and especially Reynald of Châtillon, seen as a potential regent if the young king becomes fully incapacitated. At that moment, Odo of Saint-Amand, the Templars' Grand Master, breaks off to guard Gaza, leaving Baldwin's field force even thinner against a vastly superior opponent. Saladin's total army is said to be as high as 26,000 men, overwhelmingly larger than the crusader force, yet a significant portion is dispersed in raiding parties and disruption across enemy territory. Those detached forces are said to be under Ivelinus, an Armenian convert, while Saladin leads the main body himself. That main body is estimated at 10,000 to 15,000 troops, mostly light cavalry, but it also includes an elite Mamluk guard, well-trained Egyptian soldiers, and veterans and auxiliaries from Syria. In essence, this is an army built for speed, built to maintain constant pressure, and built to turn enemy land into its own supply storehouse. Reaching Ascalon, the Crusaders already see the marks of Ayyubid raiding, yet Baldwin understands the main force is still behind and far more dangerous. He issues a call to arms. Every Christian able to bear weapons must rally to his banner, because the kingdom has entered a moment of utmost peril. Around November 22nd or 23rd, Saladin's vanguard appears, and beneath a weak winter sun, the two monarchs come close enough to know this is no longer rumor. Saladin sits his horse with cloak and turban tapering in the cold wind, while Baldwin looks down from the walls, mail glinting, the red cross on his tunic like a silent declaration. Baldwin signals Jerusalem's army to march out and deploy before Ascalon's walls, perhaps still not fully grasping the scale of what is approaching. As the formation of 375 Frankish knights and roughly 1,000 infantry steadies, Saladin's force rises into view like an unbroken line on the horizon. The numbers keep swelling until it feels as if the earth itself is covered with men and horses, and fear becomes something you can almost touch. Facing a force at least 10 times their size, the Crusaders withdraw back into Ascalon, while Saladin orders his vanguard to contain Baldwin there, and sends another detachment to besiege Gaza, where Odo holds. Because he left his heavy baggage at Al-Arish to improve mobility, Saladin cannot remain in one place for long, so he moves on with his main body along the road toward Ibelin. On that route stands the bridge over the Sorek River, a serious medieval obstacle that any army must cross with time and order. His forward raiders have already seized the key bridge over the Ascalon River north of Ramla, meaning Saladin controls the crucial locks along the road. From there to Jerusalem, little remains but scattered garrisons, and Saladin has reason to believe the small force under a 16-year-old king cannot pose a major threat. Even with scouts screening his rear, Saladin seems to underestimate the young opponent, and that is the point where history is about to punish him. Baldwin believes Jerusalem faces a direct danger, so he sends an urgent message to Odo: break out from Gaza and join him. Odo succeeds, dashing north with 80 Templars, as if a single day's delay could bring everything down. At Ascalon, Baldwin also launches a surprise sortie, breaks the Ayyubid blocking force, and regains freedom of movement. News of Saladin's advance sparks panic in Jerusalem. Many flee into the Tower of David, fearing the symbol on the Temple Mount will be replaced, and their world will enter a new dawn. Baldwin gathers about 450 knights, along with roughly 1,000 infantry assembled at Ascalon, and immediately pursues Saladin. In the days before, many Christian fighters answering the call were intercepted by Ayyubid raiders, yet about 2,000 still make it through to join the king near Ibelin. Baldwin's army thus grows to around 3,000 men, but he remains outmatched by the Ayyubid main force near Ramla at roughly 3 to 5 to 1. On November 24th, Muslim scouts spot the crusader column, and Saladin sees Baldwin's banner. The king of Jerusalem is within reach. He realizes the enemy has grown stronger since Ascalon, so he decides to force battle before Baldwin can recruit more troops. But then something happens that makes even seasoned observers hesitate. The Crusader column suddenly changes direction, as if avoiding Ramla and refusing a direct confrontation. They hurry along a path that seems deserted, yet it is a route unfamiliar to the Muslims and deeply familiar to the locals. That territory belongs to Baldwin II of Ramla and his brother Balian of Ibelin, men who know the ground so well they can predict when it will turn to mud. The path crosses the Gaza stream and passes the small town of Montgisard, and in November the stream often overflows, turning the ploughed fields north of it into soaked marsh-like ground. If Saladin pursues into that terrain, his mobile army will be slowed, and the comfort of numerical superiority will begin to vanish. Baldwin and Raynald agree this is where they will compel Saladin to fight, and if they lose, they can still escape east along this route into the mountains toward Jerusalem. As Saladin begins crossing the stream at Montgisard, the Crusaders round the ridge to the east and slip out of sight into the valley beyond. Saladin still moves quickly, but not with the headlong pace of the campaign's opening, because the topography begins to compress his column. The army piles up near the bridge, and wet ground forces extra effort to move men and horses through the soggy ravine. Saladin believes there is no danger of an ambush at the crossing, since the Crusaders are estimated to be at least 3 miles, about 5 kilometers, to the east. He and his officers urge the men forward to close the distance, and by around noon, roughly 9,000 troops have crossed. But when Saladin reaches the eastern side of the ridge, he looks down and sees a sight that forces every plan to be rewritten in an instant. The Crusaders are waiting in full battle formation in the valley. Baldwin commands at most about 500 heavy knights, trained for elite warfare since childhood. Yet they are only a fraction of Saladin's roughly 2,500 heavy cavalry. Behind the knights stand around 2,500 infantry, gathered in the days before the battle, and Saladin scrambles to form his lines, yet time no longer favors him. Baldwin finds a strength he attributes to the Holy Spirit and drives his men forward with faith and will, and the knights follow as a single mass. Saladin focuses on organizing his mounted archers and heavier squadrons, knowing the first heavy crusader charge will be the hardest to absorb, after which his wings can flow around and crush them from the flanks. The crusaders look up to the ridge and see the Ayyubids forming on higher ground, and they understand that every second lost is another second. Saladin locks the battlefield into place. Baldwin refuses to give him that time and sends his horsemen forward at full gallop. The knights ride through a hail of arrows, and most shafts glance off armor like rain striking stone. Saladin's bodyguard in yellow tunics closes around him as the surge of men and horses comes on without slowing. Muslim lances thrust downward, yet the impact of the Crusader cavalry slams into the Ayyubid line and tears a deeper rupture than expected. Men are thrown back, lances break, swords come free, and the Ayyubid front rank splits amid the sound of steel, hooves, and shouting. As the Crusaders press uncomfortably close, Saladin orders his cavalry on the flanks to swing out and strike the Crusader wings and rear, aiming to break the enemy formation from the side. But his cavalry cannot flow as planned, because Latin infantry arrives in time to support the charge, pinning Ayyubid companies in place and denying them the space to envelop. At the front, the Latins with the Templars at their center break through Saladin's guard line, and for a brief moment even the Sultan becomes exposed. In that moment, a visor-helmed knight drives straight into the gap, aiming directly for Saladin. Saladin sees the danger, his eyes widening as he raises his weapon. But the Frank has reach and momentum, and the blow nearly lands. 3 bodyguards wrench themselves away from their own fights to block the attack, and Saladin is pulled back, breathing hard as the line buckles around him. From the rear, he tries to rally his soldiers, because if morale falls, the formation will fall with it. He launches a cavalry charge to push the crusaders back, and the battlefield erupts into fierce fighting. For the first time that day, the crusaders lose momentum, yet Baldwin's army remains tightly packed, supported by foot and horse working together. Saladin attempts another charge, then another series of violent clashes, but each effort strikes the wall of men and steel without producing a decisive turn. Among the Ayyubid ranks, fatigue and doubt begin to seep in, and for an army that lives by rhythm and motion, that is a deadly infection. The Crusaders, their captains at the front, gather themselves for the final push, and the Egyptian and Syrian troops are driven from the field. Worse comes during the retreat, when part of Saladin's wagon train clogs the bridge, turning the escape route into a deadly bottleneck. The withdrawing troops are pressed toward the ford, and losses rise amid chaos, crowding, and desperation. In a single day, Baldwin, the teenage king, wins a victory his contemporaries regard as unusually decisive against a sultan famed for courage and military skill. Exact numbers are unclear, and William of Tyre writes that the Latins lost around 1,000 men, while nearly the entire Muslim army was destroyed at Montgisard. Yet the original script itself cautions that nearly annihilated may be an exaggeration, even as it insists Saladin suffered heavy losses. The pivot point comes when Saladin has just crossed the stream and is still forming his line, while Baldwin chooses to strike before the flanking plan can close like a pair of jaws. In the drag of mud underfoot, the thunder of hooves, the hiss of arrows, and the crash of metal on metal, the crusader charge becomes a spear thrust driven deep, then held in place by infantry support so it cannot be snapped by the wings. When the visor-helmed knight nearly reaches Saladin, the entire battlefield seems to hold its breath, because a single missed beat could have bent history in another direction. And when the bridge chokes during the retreat, numerical strength turns into weight, and disaster spreads faster than any command can contain. After the battle, the Ayyubid force breaks into smaller groups, and the very countryside they had been pillaging turns against them through ambushes, pursuit, and plunder. The original script states that Latin forces and Bedouin clans take part in massacres and looting of fleeing groups, so the consequences extend beyond the field itself. Fast messengers are sent to Cairo, where the decree goes out that Saladin has won a great victory and remains safe, soon to return with his illustrious army. But shrewd counselors understand the code of such words and recognize that a serious calamity has struck the Sultan. Saladin does eventually return, avoiding ambushes and pursuers, and begins the process of reasserting his power and rebuilding his army, because this invasion has been a disaster. But it is not the end. The script emphasizes that Saladin's will and ambition make this defeat only the beginning of his returns, not a final period. On the Crusader side, Baldwin commissions a new monastery on the site of his victory, and for Christendom he becomes an unlikely protector, an unexpected champion at 16, carrying illness into battle. And so observers wait, with both excitement and dread, to see what fate will bring for these two extraordinary men, a sick young king and a sultan who refuses to stop. If you've stayed with me to the end, thank you. What remains here isn't just victory or defeat. It's the way a fragile body can still hold an unbreakable will when everything seems to tilt toward the enemy. If you have your own thoughts on Baldwin IV, on Saladin, or on the moment one decision changed an entire campaign, leave a comment below. I'd truly like to read it. And if you'd like to continue, after this setback, how did Saladin rise again, and how long could Baldwin endure what was coming next? Join me in the next video on the channel.